there any relevance of native speaker norms? That's a question for TEFLologists. Is it better to focus on form or to focus on forms? That's a question for TEFLologists. If you use a textbook, is your classroom authentic, or should your approach be more learner-centric? From feedback to learner autonomy, we'll discuss it all on TEFLology.
Hi, I'm Matthew.
I'm Rob.
I'm Matt.
And welcome back to the TEFLology Podcast, a podcast all about teaching English as a foreign language and related matters, presented by three self-certified TEFLologists.
Today's TEFL pioneer is Wilga M. Rivers. Have you heard of Wilga M. Rivers?
Yes.
Yes. Where have you heard of her from?
I'm not sure, but the name has certainly popped up here and there.
Okay. Well, this was actually a TEFL pioneer suggested by Russ Main, who I think is probably best known for his appearance on this podcast. So Wilga Rivers was born in 1919 in Melbourne, which is in Australia.
Okay.
She completed a BA and an MA at the University of Melbourne. She taught at public schools in Australia and then in the UK. Mm-hmm. After that, she went to France and became an English teacher. Mm-hmm. Okay. She returned to Australia in 1954 and taught at a girls' grammar school. And in that school, the approach to foreign language teaching was based on group work, autonomy, cooperation, oral competency. So all of the buzzwords. Yep. Right? After the school got a new manager who wanted to change those methods, she resigned. And she moved to America, where she studied for a PhD at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Is that right?
Very good.
In 1962. She completed it in 1962. And after that, she became a professor of Romance languages at Harvard.
Wow.
And that's Wilga Rivers. So she's probably best known for her work, or perhaps she became known for her work criticising behaviourism. Okay. So she wrote this book in 1964, which is called The Psychologist and the Foreign Language Teacher. This is a first edition in pristine condition, which I got off Amazon. And in the book, she criticised the behaviourist foundations of audiolingualism. So this is in 1964. And while she acknowledged the necessity of making foreign language responses automatic at the manipulative level, if that makes sense, she felt that the audiolingual method didn't sufficiently emphasise the emotional or the affective component of foreign language learning. Okay. She also argued that material had to be made meaningful for learners, and output had to include personal meaning rather than just the kind of audiolingual drills.
Yep.
Okay. So I want to discuss this book a little bit and some of the reaction to the book, especially some of the more recent criticism of the book, actually. So the book's divided into 6 sections. First, the introduction, then a chapter describing the audiolingual method, and then she talks about the major assumptions about language learning which underpin audiolingualism. Okay? So, assumption 1, foreign language learning is basically a mechanical process of habit formation. Do you agree with that?
No.
In parts, yeah.
In part?
Yeah.
Which part?
Well, maybe I don't agree, but I think there is a place for habit formation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say.
Yes.
I mean, there's a place for it, but the statement is saying that this is basically what it is.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And as I said, she even said she agreed that making foreign language responses automatic at the manipulative level was fair. The second assumption is language skills are learned more effectively if items of the foreign language are presented in spoken form before written form. Yes. Do you agree with that?
If you look at a teacher teaching a class, arguably they would do that.
Okay.
They present the target language orally before it's seen by the learners, or maybe simultaneously, actually.
I don't know, just based on my experience as a language learner, I think that whether the spoken form or the written form comes first is maybe not the most important factor. Maybe how it's presented or my emotional connection to that bit of language, or whether or not it's presented in communicative context, those things matter a lot more.
Yeah.
And I think I feel like I've acquired items of language, that I saw written first and I've heard first. So.
Yeah, maybe it also depends if your reading or listening skills are better in
True.
the language. Because my listening in Japanese is quite poor. So when someone says something to me in Japanese, I don't remember it. But if I see it written down because it's got the kanji, I do remember it. So.
Right, but you think that's different for some people?
I think it might be different for some people. It might be different depending on the language. I don't know.
Yeah, like Matt said, maybe it depends on the need or the emotional investment. So if you see something written down that you're interested in finding out about, then you're going to learn it in the same way if you hear it.
Right.
Arguably.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly, language items, forms, whatever, that I've heard repeatedly, and maybe I've never seen them written down. In fact, there's a lot that I've only ever heard.
Yes.
But I have a strong understanding of what they are. And maybe vice versa as well.
Right. Yeah. So maybe that's also questionable, that second assumption. The third assumption is that maybe a little bit difficult to pass. Analogy provides a better foundation for foreign language learning than analysis. So what I take that to mean is that analogy is you learn a structure and then you use the structure in a different way. Like
extrapolate to others.
I think so. I think that's what it means.
Like a rule, like this can be used to achieve this.
Right. I think that kind of thing.
I wonder.
Rather than analysis, which is studying the language at a kind of a micro level.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
I think it could. That could be what it means. Analogy.
Yeah. I did read the book, but this was the bit that I found a bit confusing, to be honest.
But again, there's a time and a place for both.
Right.
Yeah. Right. But there's the theory that all language is analogy.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. The final assumption. So this one's quite interesting. The meaning which the words of a language have for the native speaker can be learned only in a matrix of allusions to the culture of the people who speak that language. That was a chapter heading, a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah. Sorry, it was the last part. It can be learned only in a matrix of allusions.
To the culture of the people who speak that language.
Yeah.
Meaning that words and meaning are tied to, like, signifiers, like...
Meaning you can only learn a word...
Images.
When you can only learn the true meaning of a word, or the meaning that the word has to native speakers, if we accept that term, if it's learned in conjunction with cultural references.
Right.
Yeah, so that I think that's sometimes true. But it also depends what it says. The meaning which the words of a language have, then it can only be learned. I mean, first of all, what do we mean by learned at this point?
Yeah.
Like if I want to, point at a cat and say cat, I can do that in several foreign languages. I don't know all the cultural baggage that the word cat in that language has.
Right.
But for certain purposes, I can maybe use that foreign word.
Okay. So maybe all four of the assumptions we could say are questionable. And indeed, so does Rivers. So in her book, she questions all of these, and her approach is to look at the most recent psychology at the time, 1964. It's a bit dated now, to kind of show that these assumptions don't really work, and thus to kind of attack behaviorism, attack audiolingualism, and promote CLT, the principles that she used when she was teaching in the high school in Australia.
Right.
So this was quite an influential book at the time, and some people have attributed some of the declining popularity of audiolingualism in part to this book. But recently, there's been some criticism of the book. Right? So in 2006, I'm going to get the pronunciation wrong, but Castagnaro, I think is the name of the...
Okay.
Castagnaro, maybe?
Yeah, sounds good.
So he wrote an article in Applied Linguistics where he argued that Rivers is incorrect in some of what she says, and in particular he focused on the fact that when she talked about behaviorism, she said that it was the theory of Skinner, B.F. Skinner, verbal behavior. And he, I think he shows quite convincingly that she's wrong, that when she attributes audiolingualism to Skinner, she's making a mistake. And he does this by showing like the roots of audiolingualism and the different dates and how they don't line up with her reporting of it. But he says that she may have done this because perhaps audiolinguists at that time had sort of seized on Skinner's work as a way of justifying their practices. And he offers this passage from her book in support of the idea that she blames audiolingualism on Skinner. Okay. So, there would appear to be two distinct schools of thought among psychologists on the nature of language. The behaviourist school in the Watson tradition, represented by Skinner, which takes account only of physical manifestations of language that are outwardly observable, and the neo-behaviouristic, which allows a place for meditational and emotional processes that are not directly observable. It is the contention of the writer that the audiolingual methods are based on the Skinnerian theory, and it is from this basic theoretical position that their advocacy of mimicry memorization in pattern drills and dialogue learning has been derived. Okay. So the second half of that is the contention of this writer that the audiolingual methods are based on the Skinnerian theory. That seems, and that's the bit that Castagnaro highlights, that seems like he's saying this was all Skinner's doing.
She's saying.
But I think there's another way of reading it. And having read the book, I also think there's another way of reading it. I think what she's doing is saying that Skinner is the most recent and the fullest representative.
Right. I mean, earlier in that quote, she says, represented by Skinner.
Yes. Yeah. And so I think when she talks about Skinner, so he said she's talking about this because the audiolinguist seized on Skinner. I think that's true, and I also think that's kind of reasonable.
Right.
Because he's the one who even though his work wasn't focused on it, if people were using this to justify their work, then I think it's kind of understandable why she did that, even if she's wrong in perhaps making too much focus on Skinner.
And I think it matters less, like, whose theory it was or who came out. She's attacking the theory more than the person.
Yes, yeah. And in the appendix of the book, she goes through all of the different precursors to Skinner and behaviorism in one of the appendices. So she is obviously aware of this tradition, this growing tradition. So this has all been tied up in a debate that Russ Main had on his blog, actually, about where did audiolingualism come from? And it seems to me that it was kind of like a muddle of different practices that then sort of coalesced into something, was the impression I get.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think even if Rivers is wrong about Skinner being the theoretical parent of audiolingualism, it doesn't make her critique of audiolingualism wrong. Yeah. So even if his theories didn't lead to it, her criticisms of what it became are still okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's maybe her most controversial contribution, I guess. Okay. But after that, Rivers went on to write several other books, including Teaching Foreign Language Skills in 1968, which for a while was referred to as the Bible of language teaching. And she tried to bring together all of her ideas into a series of principles of language teaching. Okay. So in 1989, she wrote the book Principles of Interactive Language Teaching. Okay. And Claire Cramch in 1989 wrote a biographical tribute piece to her in the Modern Language Journal, which is very interesting. You can read that. It's very nice. She died in 2007, so 18 years of retirement. Pretty good. I think I'll be lucky to make it to retirement. So. But she's remembered as a strong proponent of the communicative approach and for attacks on behaviorism. Even if they're a little bit questionable, I think they were certainly important and influential. So that's our TEFL pioneer, Wilga Rivers.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about a somewhat of a rather clickbaity article that I came across the other day, which is called Women Only Said 27% of the Words in 2016's Biggest Movies. Okay. So you can immediately see why I clicked on it and wanted to read it based on the type of title.
Yes.
And this is an online article by Amber Thomas, and it's written for a website called freecodecamp.com.
Okay.
But it's a website that has articles, but they're all kind of they use some sort of data or statistics to make their point, which is what I'll talk about today.
Okay.
She basically talks about her excitement at seeing certain posters for movies of this year, such as Rogue One, and seeing the prominent figure of the title character, or the main protagonist, Jyn Erso, played by Felicity Jones. So she talks about her excitement. She's thinking, okay, great, we're going to see a strong protagonist. But what she didn't realise is on the poster, that's the only female character on the whole poster.
On the poster?
On the poster.
Okay.
On the poster. So she wanted to look into this a little bit more and see if this was a theme in other top grossing movies of the year. Not just in terms of the characters, but in terms of speaking parts,
Right.
essentially, as a percentage of the entire movie.
What counts as a top movie? Is like the best reviewed or the biggest box office?
She talked about the worldwide highest grossing films
Okay.
of 2016. Which were? Do you know?
Rogue One.
Rogue 2.
Finding Dory.
Finding Dory, yeah.
Secret Life of Pets. Is that in there?
Yes.
Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them.
Yes.
What else? Captain America.
Yes.
Thor. Batman and Superman. Was that that?
Yes, that's there.
Suicide Squad.
Suicide Squad, yeah.
Really?
We
Yeah,
no, that was like
Deadpool.
Deadpool, we've got two more, I think, that you
Okay,
haven't said. One's animated.
Right.
The other was animated.
It came to life.
But was originally a book.
The Jungle Book.
Right. Okay.
And another animated one. You got to pick. There must have been a Disney one.
Yeah.
Zootopia.
Yeah, so she looked at these movies and she wanted to see, of these 10 movies, what percentage of dialogue was spoken by men, what was spoken by women.
So not necessarily number of speaking parts, but like just looking at who said the actual words that make up the script.
Yeah, basically, just in total,
Yep.
we're talking about extras, any sound or any voice that is picked up. Basically, she took all of that data and.
How would she know? Like just based on, I mean, if you had like, for example, an animated film, how would you know if it was male or female?
She talked about some of the problems. So she first based it on like pronouns, so how other characters were referring to characters. She then looked at, and she basically said, I took an educated guess. Or she looked on IMDb and looked at if actors were played by male or female. Sorry, if characters were played by male or female actors.
But then that wouldn't necessarily be correct, like The Simpsons.
Right, yeah. So she said some caveats were that there were often female voicing male characters and male voicing female characters, and sometimes things spoke that weren't a gender. So she tried to kind of assume what gender was implied. Well, no, she made assumptions. That's what she did with this study, basically, because of what male and female is. Before we look at some of the results, what do you think?
I think it's a good thing to do because I think that's the kind of bias that maybe you wouldn't necessarily pick up on unless someone went and quantified it in that way. But of course, there are other measures like. For example, I know that in research into gender in textbooks, they found even when they balanced the amount of speech between men and women, they found that men had more content in their speech. And women were just going, "Oh, great, that's a nice idea."
Yeah,
John.
we'll come on to that later. That was my point with this news section. Is we'll try and tie this to ELT in some way, which is usually what we do in this news section.
Right.
Yeah, and one of the other reasons was she talked about all these promising female not protagonists but lead characters such as Wonder Woman, Harley Quinn.
Wonder Woman didn't say anything; just showed up and went hello.
Right, yeah. Dory as well, obviously. Yeah. And she looked at data from. So a lot of film fans often transcribe entire movies, put the dialogues on the internet for everyone to read. So in most of these cases, they were available, but I think for some of the films, she had to manually transcribe. She used some software to do that, obviously. If you actually, we'll put the link up to this in the podcast description. But if you go online, if you go on the internet, you can interact with the data. You can kind of click on things, and it will show you. So I think this is called a scatter plot. Is that correct?
Don't ask me. It's got numbers in it. I don't know anything about it.
What it is, and again, we'll put links to this in the podcast description. She provided a series of like circles, all varying in size and colour, and this determined the spread of male and female speech, I guess, utterances in the entire film.
Yeah.
And the circles get bigger with the amount of words spoken.
Right.
So each of these circles represents a character in the movie.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
And then the gender is indicated if it's by the color.
By the colour, yeah.
And then the size is how many words they speak.
Yes, that's it basically. Yeah.
Yep.
So you can see here. I mean, let's look at Rogue One.
Okay.
Okay, you can see the amount of darker colours, which indicates male.
Yep. Yep.
It seems like there was like one female character, but she spoke a bit more than all of the male characters.
Right.
Individually.
So you can guess which the female,
Right.
who the female character is just by well, you can guess Jyn Erso's character.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right there.
But there's a male character who spoke more than her.
Yeah.
In the movie.
Was that Grand Moff Tarkin?
Could be.
Which one's Leia, do you think?
Leia must just be the tiny
ones.
dot.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that little dot there.
And again, look at Deadpool here. I mean, we know who the main character is there.
Yeah.
He's the merc
Pretty
with the
obvious.
mouth. So he should be speaking a lot, right?
Yes.
Now, Zootopia and Finding Dory, these were a bit more balanced. We'll talk about some of the actual percentages in just a moment. But
Yeah.
just by looking at that, you can see.
Yeah, well, they
that-
have female
There was
protagonists.
one girl who spoke a lot, one woman who spoke a lot, one female who spoke a lot.
Yeah.
To use the politically correct term.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, so basically family films have more balance, it seems.
I don't know if you could. Jungle Book isn't very balanced.
That's
Secret
not a
Life of
family
Pets.
film.
The thing is with Jungle Book that she mentioned is Scarlett Johansson plays the voice
Snake.
of the car. What's the name? Car?
Car.
Is it? Yeah.
Car.
Yeah, Car. Yeah.
But is
Yeah.
Car a male or female character?
In this case, male.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, because the character's male.
Mm.
But this was one of the caveats she said. But she assumed that it was a male character. In
Mm.
terms
Right,
of gender, it's a male character.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll look at some of the percentages. Not one of the top 10 movies of 2016 had a 50% speaking female cast.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about grossing movies. I know when I was reading this, I thought about Ghostbusters, the new Ghostbusters, and I wonder how that would fare. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it wasn't a top 10 grossing movie
Yeah.
Yeah.
for many reasons, but yeah.
It's mainly sexism, though, isn't it?
Finding Dory was the closest to the level with 43% female characters in terms of dialogue spoken.
Yeah. But actually, more spoken dialogue from the female characters according to this chart, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But the number of characters were fewer, but the amount.
Yeah.
Yeah, there needed to be 8 more speaking female roles to make it equal,
Okay.
according to this. Rogue One was the worst of all of the grossing top 10 grossing movies. Only 9% of its speaking characters were female.
Right. Which is weird because that was kind of touted a little bit as a kind of feminist thing because of that main character being a strong female woman.
Well, I think that statistic doesn't negate the fact that it has a strong female character in the central role, and just because she doesn't speak more than other characters.
Well, she does speak more than other characters individually.
Right, no, but there is for example, there is one main character who
yeah.
speaks more than her, but that doesn't negate her position as a strong female character.
That's true.
She doesn't speak as much.
She said of the Rogue One female characters, one was a computer voice, one appeared on screen for no more than 5 seconds, and one was a CGI
Spoiler.
cameo that said one word.
Oh, right.
Right.
Yeah, Finding Dory and Zootopia were the only 2 movies in 2016's top 10 which had whose female characters had the most dialogue.
Yeah.
So that's positive, I think.
Okay.
Female characters were outnumbered in Captain America, and Batman spoke 2.4 times more than Superman, and 6 times more than Wonder Woman in Batman vs Superman.
Well, the plot was more Batman heavy, wasn't it? And Wonder Woman was basically an add-on at the end.
Yeah.
Like an optional extra.
And Superman's an illegal alien.
Right.
And a regular alien as well. A literal alien.
But I was wondering how this would play out in textbooks.
Well, funny you should mention that. I'm involved in editing the textbook on the course that I work on, and in preparing the textbook for the coming semester, we did have a look at the gender balance. And after we had finished the first draft, We went through, and we have some characters in the book.
Yeah. It's two male and two female.
Two male and two female.
Yeah, I think that's the case.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we went through and we counted how many words are said by the male and female in the dialogues. We also checked in terms of firstness, who speaks first, and also what was the other factor? Speaking turns, which was also the same, and I think also just in terms of like content.
Right.
So sometimes we go back and read it, and the male character says their opinion, and then the female characters are agreeing or disagreeing, etc.
Right.
And again, like you said, it's not intentional, but sometimes it ends up that way.
Yeah.
And then we could go through and make small adjustments.
I do the same thing in my personal materials. I try very hard to make everything balanced as much as possible.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, there's been a number of studies done into this kind of field. I couldn't find anything that looked particularly at percentage of speaking role, like as a percentage, like this Amber Thomas did.
Yeah.
But people have looked at firstness, who comes first, he or she, or that kind of thing. Visibility, in terms of images.
Yes.
There was a study by Arakan 2004 that looked at the distribution of images in ELT textbooks. And of this study, there are only 2 textbooks, but they found 212 images of men, which equated to 70.2%, and female 29.8%.
Yeah. There was a study by me in 2013.
Okay.
Have you read this?
No.
I published
By me.
it
By you.
By me.
Or
yeah.
someone called me.
No, by me.
Right. Okay.
I published a study in 2013 looking at the representation of males and females in cram school materials in Japan.
Right. Okay.
And like not so much the speaking terms, but the adjectives used to describe them was one point. And like the men were described as being, fun, and the women were described as just being. I can't remember the exact adjectives. But
this is a thing that often happens when I listen to like student discussions about, for example, about crime. They'll often make the criminal a he.
Right.
Or if they're talking about
statistically, though, that's correct.
but that's interesting. I don't know why that happens. It's an interesting.
Yeah, it's what's it called? The generic pronoun, right? The generic pronoun is usually assigned as a he, but then if you look at the ways that it's assigned, like in my classes, they do that as well. It's very clear what their gendered perceptions are of different roles in society.
There's visibility. Firstness, and also things like discourse roles and contributions. And there was another study about speech acts, and for example, there was one that I read about making complaints and the roles, who's making the complaint, and the position of the female and the male. Aside from the things that I just mentioned, what implications could there be for this study?
Well, I mean, just in general, in language. In society, we kind of need to be more aware of these biases. In terms of language, these are biases that people are kind of aware of. I mean, as you say, there's already a lot of linguistic work into it.
Yeah.
But how much of that has crossed over into the actual production for ELT, the production of materials, even like classroom management, trying to include people or asking questions to certain students, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think being more aware of it through this kind of study is probably going to help with that.
Okay, so that was this week's TEFL news, I guess TEFL, looking at the percentage of male and female spoken parts in 2016's grossing films.
So for this episode's TEFL culture, this is culture as suggested by one of our listeners, a competition winner of our Halloween ebook, Mike Karate. He said, I'm currently looking at ways to get out of the isolation of being a freelance teacher, and I'm thinking of joining an international association, such as TESOL or ITEFL. Any suggestions?
Well, yeah, what I was going to say there is start local, and I've done that. I've started local, so I've looked at the ones that are close to me currently in Japan, which is JOUT, which we've mentioned a lot, and our last series of interviews were conducted at their conference. So JOUT is one of them that I've joined.
Yeah.
Are we talking just about English teaching? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I've joined JOUT and JASET and the JOUT special interest groups. One that I want to join is BAL, British Association of Applied Linguistics, which is more of a research-focused thing. And I'm also a member of ETJ, is that right? English Teachers in Japan.
Right.
Which is like a free one, but
Okay.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. So JALT is the Japan Association of Language Teachers.
Mm-hmm.
I guess is the biggest association in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So what benefits have you felt from being a member of JALT, for example?
I've published in their journals a few times, which is good. I've learned some things from going to their conferences. In terms of like a personal learning network, not really.
Okay.
Because I've found when I've gone to the JALT conferences that people kind of hang out with people they already know.
Yeah.
So I've never really met any new people there. I've just met people that I already know. So
Yeah, I think like it's an outlet for publications. It's a good outlet. It's a good, it gives you the opportunity to publish, present, meet other people. It can work for you. You can make it work for you.
Yeah.
If you know how to.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe one thing we
What you
should say
make of it,
about JALT and other big organizations is that. So you mentioned the special interest groups, the SIGs. So I think when you become a member of these organizations, there's maybe a couple of things you can then choose. One is to join one of their special interest groups. Can you talk about what do SIGs do?
SIGs are, it stands for Special Research Interest Group, I guess.
Special Interest Group. Yeah.
And I guess they have different meanings, but they focus on one or a broad area of research. And I think they come together, have meetings, they may conduct research together or hold conferences, mini presentations. They may have their own publications.
Yep.
And as you said, some are more active than others. I think some probably, in terms of the sciences, maybe they're a bit more active in terms of conducting research, and a group of prominent figures would probably come together and
some of them seem like a bit of a misnomer. Like, for example, the college and university educators one, they've got a good journal, and I think they're a good thing.
That's one of JALT.
That's one at JALT, yes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, JALT is kind of a college and university educators group mostly. So the special interest groups for me are more like the ones with more specific focus. Like, for example, conversation school teachers would be an interesting one. Yeah. People who otherwise wouldn't be that represented within the group, I'd say. Okay.
The other thing that these organizations often offer is kind of local chapters. So JALT has
Tokyo, Saitama.
Yeah.
I imagine.
So all the big cities and the different areas of Japan. And I guess those are kind of like special interest groups, but more geographically bound than others. Again, it's smaller groups where people can get together and share ideas.
Yeah. So the listener was asking about international groups. So there is a difference between local and international groups. So you said start local. Yeah. What do you think is the benefit of starting local as opposed to going international?
Yeah, well, that's weird you say that. Like, I joined JALT because this was going back like 8 or 9 years ago, because it seemed like the done thing. People that I knew, that it was cropping up all over the place, this word, this acronym. So that's what I did. Yeah, and as yet I haven't joined an international organisation, but I'm toying with the idea of joining TEFL, which is, I guess, the British equivalent to TESOL in America.
Yeah, and you're a member of TESOL.
I am now, yeah.
Yeah, what's your membership number?
And TESOL has, like, country-specific version?
Yeah, that's right,
Yeah.
So, I may have, to be honest, I don't remember. I may have been a member of TEFL a long time ago in a previous life. But it's a similar thing. So I just actually from there. So I printed off some information from JALT, TESOL, and TEFL's websites, and they all have things about basically why they think it's important to become a member of their organization. And there's some interesting kind of similarities. So JALT says, in short, becoming a JALT member puts you in touch with thousands of dedicated language teaching professionals and expands your opportunities to grow as a member of the educational community.
I think it probably does expand your opportunities. I wouldn't say it's expanded my opportunities, but that's because I don't take the opportunities because I'm antisocial.
So TEFL says, TEFL membership gives you access to a worldwide network of English language teachers. Yeah, so maybe a similar thing. that might be of more interest to people who, I think maybe in all our teaching contexts, we live in a big city, we work quite closely with a lot of other teachers, so maybe that's more of the network that we use for support and professional development, that kind of thing.
I think another aspect of these is that a lot of them are for not-for-profits as well. So the reason that they require membership is to put on these conferences, is to get the research out there. And they're separate from journals. They have their own journals, but they're separate from journals too.
Right.
A lot of the reason why people become members is because they want to go to these conferences or present there themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people join these kinds of things for professional advancement.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's necessarily the best use for them, because I don't know anyone who's got a job off the back of doing JALT presentations, for example. I think it adds. It looks good on your CV when you are applying for jobs. It looks good, but I don't know anyone who's ever been approached after a thing and said, "Oh, that was really mind blowing."
No. But there's certainly. I mean, obviously, at the JALT National Conference, you see people who seem to really embrace the opportunity to network and meet other people and feel like they're part of that community of language teachers across Japan.
Scheming careers.
I don't know about that, but and maybe in a sideways way that may help them in their careers down the line. I'm not sure. The TESOL website talks about the benefits of its membership, and theirs seem to be a lot more practical.
Right.
So they say TESOL International Association provides you with the resources you need to do your job every day. TESOL membership helps thousands of professionals just like you become more effective, more knowledgeable, and more skilled in the field of English language teaching and learning. And since I became a member just a few months ago, they do seem to be sending me a lot of information about different professional learning opportunities and that kind of thing. Based on that and my brief experience with IATEFL a few years ago, IATEFL felt very much more focused just on the conference and maybe presenting at the conference and publishing.
Yeah.
But in terms of, I don't know, maybe in terms of more professional development opportunities, I'd say maybe TESOL is a stronger option.
Right.
If that's something that you're interested in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like the listener was interested in building more of a personal network, right? Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
So do you see yourself building up a personal network as a result of joining this organisation?
It's hard to say. I mean, to be honest, I have met people at JALT conferences who I've stayed in touch with. I don't take part in the SIGs and the local JALT chapters so much, but I know people who do, and they seem to get something out of it.
Right.
I'd say that any communities of teachers that I knew about already was pre-existing to conferences, but we all happened to just be at the conference.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think I've made many sort of strong contacts at conferences.
No. I think conferences are a bit like house parties. Generally, I'll just stand in the corner and talk to my friends.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe putting aside the benefits or not of membership of these kind of organizations, sometimes these kind of organizations do get criticized for certain things. One is that maybe they're seen as representing a certain authority of language teaching. The people that they invite to speak as plenary speakers are usually the big names in language teaching.
Yeah.
Do you think this danger exists?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, an organisation it's a kind of a mini society, right? And in society, certain people rise to the top and they build up their connections, and that's how everything works. So it's kind of unavoidable in a sense, unless someone goes out of their way to avoid it.
Right. But do you think these organizations that have become, some of them like IATEFL and TESOL, have become so big and maybe so influential in the world of language teaching, do they have a responsibility to address certain political issues? Or
so is this where you were going to bring up Jeff Jordan's recent...
Right.
Yeah.
So Jeff Jordan recently wrote a blog post about IATEFL, and I'll just read a quote from his blog. He said, "The ruling body of IATEFL, registered as a charitable organization, says that IATEFL can't get involved in politics, and so they had no choice but to reject attempts to make teachers as workers a SIG. So this is a group of teachers. The Teachers as Workers SIG, they're trying to get recognized unsuccessfully.
Is it not a SIG?
No.
I thought it was a SIG.
No, it calls itself a SIG, but it's not.
But it's unofficial.
Okay.
So IATEFL said, sorry, but despite our mission statement, which says we will support English language teaching professionals worldwide, in quotes, we are bound by our charter not to get involved in politics. But basically he accuses them of kind of cherry picking.
Yeah.
He says the plenary talk about non-native speakerism was a kind of political statement.
Right.
But here they're, for whatever reason, rejecting the Teachers as Workers and maybe missing the opportunity to try to support, unequal opportunities in the language teaching world. But I mean, maybe even putting that specific issue aside, do you think organizations like TEFL and IATEFL, because of their power, have a responsibility to try and shine light on certain issues?
I'd like it if they did, but I don't know if it's a responsibility. I mean, I think Jeff Jordan's issue there is a charge of hypocrisy, right? That they're being political in one sense, in a safe sense, but they're not being political in an actually useful sense, or in a sense that's going to make problems for themselves in a way. So I think if they say we're not being political and they're actually not being political, then kind of fine. Although I'm kind of the camp that thinks it's all political. I think even promoting certain methodologies and techniques, I think has a political undercurrent. So it depends what you define as political. Generally speaking, I think bodies like this that are supported by teachers, that are paid for by teachers, I would like them to have a certain responsibility to work in the interests of their supporters.
Yeah, teaching's not apolitical, is it, at the end of the day? So
No.
the organisations that, support this, our teaching, what we do, should also, they should be doing the same thing.
Yeah, but do they support our teaching that much? Because I've been a member of these organisations for a little while. I've supported them in terms of giving them money. They've supported me in terms of allowing me a space to present. But is there anything...
With extra money being paid.
Right, yeah, you have to pay to do that.
Yeah.
So, but what have the IATEFLs ever done for us?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do they do?
For
people.
No, I think it's.
Well, I think they, like you said, they influence. They have these topics of interest every year. This is what the buzzword of this year is. We're going to get these people to talk about it.
Yeah.
They influence.
Right.
They're mood makers.
No, it's true. Like a bunch of tweets and blogs and all these things come out of these conferences, and there are people who go to these conferences and very much look forward to the opportunity to meet other people and hear different ideas. It's just, to what extent does that actually play a part in their language? I think for some people it does play a big part.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's even a danger that these organisations could mask problems, because you can attend these conferences and you can meet up with people and you can get the idea that you're part of something big and something exciting and something's happening, and then you go back to the day-to-day, whatever you were doing before, and nothing's really changed.
Right, you go back Monday morning, try out a new activity you heard about, and then that's it.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe they almost have a malign role.
Okay. Well,
but it's a possibility. I'm not saying it is.
Of course. Okay. Well, I don't know how much we helped Mike with his question, to be honest.
But let's if we take it back to kind of very personal level, I think I'd agree. I think it's good to join a organisation, either local or international. I think
I think local organisations are good, but I'd prefer kind of micro-local organisations. So things set up by people, kind of more like special interest groups, things set up by people with shared interests that they can pursue. I sometimes feel things like JALT or JASET are too big, and they try to cover too much to the extent that individual concerns can be sidelined.
But I mean, what I would say to Mike maybe is that as a recent TEFL member, and I'll be attending the conference for the first time this year in March. And so maybe I'll come back with a report on. I've heard good things about the TEFL conference. So yeah, I'll report back.
Is that a TEFL news, a future TEFL news?
I think it will be.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so that was this episode's TEFL Culture, professional organizations.
Okay, Okay, thank you very much for listening today.
If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can send an email to TEFLology@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter @TEFLology. We've got over 1,000 followers now, which is pretty good. You can also like our Facebook page, and we'd really appreciate it if you could leave a review on iTunes or whatever podcasting service you happen to podcast this podcast from. So, is that a correct
absolutely.
grammatical sentence?
Yeah.
So, thank you for listening. It's goodbye from me.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.